The girl beaten by her family every day until a widowed cowboy took her in. Before we begin, take a moment to comment. Your city, where are you listening from tonight? And when the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. Now settle into a quiet place, breathe deep, and let the whispers of the Wild West carry you into tonight's tale. The sun poured down heavy over the vale of the forgotten. The church bell drifted thinly through the red dust. A bay horse slowed its hooves, the leather saddle creaked low. Joaquim stopped at a gate left half open. A young girl knelt on the ground, her dress torn, her hair clinging with sweat. Her father and brother loomed above her, their shouts cracking the air like whips. The smell of rust from a fallen bucket, the smoke of an old hearth, the raw scent of fear, all pressed against the widowed man's chest like a silent blade. In that moment, a breeze slipped through the mango trees, carrying the trembling sound of her breath. Joaquim tightened the reins, his voice low, spare but steady. You don't belong out here alone. The red earth went still. He placed his boot on the ground, and from that single step, the fate of 2 lives turned toward a road no one could have foreseen. The dim glow of a kerosene lamp cast trembling shadows on the old wooden walls. Dampness rose from the earthen floor, clinging to every breath. Inside that suffocating room, the sour scent of cheap liquor mingled with the stale smoke of a dead fire, forming a bitter haze. Old Antonio leaned back on a rickety chair, his eyes narrowed with suspicion, yet they sparked to life when he saw the envelope of money laid upon the table. Joaquim, tall and steady in his dust-worn coat, kept his voice low and even. I need a hand at the ranch. Your daughter, she can come. In that moment, the distance between the 2 men was not just the battered table between them, but the whole fate of a young girl trembling outside the doorway. The echo of shouted curses still lingered, yet in the dim light, Raquel was nothing more than a frail shadow bought and sold like a piece of property. Antonio rolled his cigarette between his fingers, a dry laugh escaping his throat, roughened by drink. How much? The blunt question fell heavy like a hammer, striking the heart of the widowed man. Joaquim did not blink. He pushed the envelope forward, the lamp's weak flame glinting across its thin edge. And in that instant, all the injustice of a girl's life seemed to shrink into a slip of paper. Yet from that same paper, a fragile hope began to glimmer. Perhaps this time the hand reaching out was not to strike, but to save. Outside, the wind rattled the crooked door, whispering, as if the night itself knew Raquel's destiny had just turned onto a road of no return. Part 1. The Darkness of Family. The oil lamp spilled a dull yellow light across the cramped kitchen. Rainwater dripping through the leaky roof spread damp stains across the earthen floor, carrying with it a sour, moldy smell. A dented pot, blackened with smoke, sent up the acrid scent of burnt scraps mingling with the wet wood, pressing the air tight against every breath. Raquel knelt in the corner, bare-handed, scrubbing a pile of pans with freezing water that trickled from a cracked jug. Every movement stung her thin hands raw with soot and mud, as if scraped by invisible claws. Sweat rolled down her patched blouse, mixing with ash and dust, leaving faint streaks across her back. From the rickety wooden table, her mother Clede spoke in a voice dry and sharp with not a drop of warmth. Hurry up. The clothes in the yard still need washing. Keep dragging your feet like this and we'll starve to death. No glance, no pity. Raquel only nodded, a faint yes ma'am caught in her throat. The kitchen door slammed open. Geronimo, the eldest brother, stormed in, reeking of sour sweat and cheap liquor, his face flushed red with drink, his eyes blazing. Still not done. You're slower than a turtle. He splashed a ladle of water into the pans. The spray struck Raquel's face. She bit her lip, her hands trembling, but dared not lift her head. The dripping from the roof seemed to echo each harsh word. For a moment, her gaze caught her own reflection in the puddled water on the floor, a thin face, swollen eyes, both familiar and strange. She lifted her hand as if to touch it, then lowered her head and went on scrubbing an obedient shadow. Smoke stung her eyes. Outside, the church bell rang faintly, the only sound rising above the shouting. In the dim kitchen, it felt like a reminder that somewhere beyond these muddy walls another world existed. though far, far away. Geronimo kicked a chair aside and dropped heavily into it, throwing his feet on the doorway step. He grabbed a crust of bread, chewed noisily, and spat the crumbs onto the floor right where Raquel knelt. "Clean it up," he barked as though ordering an animal. Raquel bent low, her rough fingers, gathering the crumbs, swallowing back her shame. Her mother rinsed her hands in a tin basin, her voice cold as stone. "Don't look at people like that. Just get on with it. A girl who talks too much is worth nothing." Raquel bit hard on her lip. She had heard those words 1,000 times, but each time they cut deeper. The lamp cast her mother's shadow long and twisted across the wall as if warning that no dream could grow here. A sudden gust slipped through the cracks, making the flame tremble. The smell of kerosene mixed with smoke, and Raquel's eyes blurred with tears. No one noticed the thin shoulders shaking in exhaustion, or perhaps they chose not to see. Outside, a dog barked and fell silent. The kitchen sank back into a heavy stillness, broken only by the rasp of Raquel's hands against the pans. In that silence, she could hear the rush of her own heart pounding to escape her chest, and from somewhere deep inside, a thought stirred, fragile yet unyielding. Maybe somewhere out there was a place where she would no longer have to bow her head. But when her eyes met Geronimo's glare, the spark was smothered. She lowered her head again, letting her bleeding hands sink into the cold water. The front door banged open, striking the wall with a dry crack. Raquel didn't need to look. Her father was home. Antonio filled the doorway broad-shouldered, his straw hat, soaked with rain, tilted low. His shirt clung with sweat and liquor, the stench thick enough to choke. A leather whip hung across his shoulder, swaying with each heavy step. His eyes swept the kitchen, resting on his daughter, kneeling in the dirt. His voice came rough-edged with scorn. "Still not done? You eat at this table all day for nothing." Raquel shivered. Her wet hands clenched the rag tight. She tried to speak, but his next command cut her off. "Look at me." Her tear-filled eyes rose to his shadowed face, every line carved by anger and domination. Antonio lifted the whip and lashed it against the floor near her hand. The crack rang out, dirt flying. Geronimo smirked, leaning back to watch the familiar cruelty. Clade shrank against the doorway, her empty eyes silent, as if she'd long learned to endure like a ghost. Raquel clenched her fists, fighting to hold back sobs. Her lips trembled, her heart hammered wild. The injustice of her life pressed like an invisible wound. In the smoke-filled kitchen, only her heartbeat and the whip's echo remained. Each strike, though it never touched her skin, cut into her soul. Somewhere far beyond the church, bell tolled into the sweltering night. Its echo seemed to whisper, beyond these rotting walls, another world was waiting. But first, Raquel would have to survive the darkness of this one. And in that moment when despair felt endless, fate was already moving. A man on horseback was drawing near, carrying with him an offer that would change everything. Part 2. The Stranger Appears. The noonday sun beat down on the Vale of the Forgotten, burning the red earth until it seemed to smoke. Dust rose in heavy clouds each time the wind swept across, carrying with it the bitter scents of sweat liquor and damp straw. Joaquim's bay horse stood still at the gate, its mane tossing hot breath, rolling in steady bursts of steam. The last hoofbeat faded, and silence settled over the yard. Only the rattle of a loose windmill and the faint toll of the church bell broke the stillness. Antonio stepped onto the porch whip, still in his hand, eyes narrowed against the glare, his stance wary. His face was flushed with drink and heat, yet when he caught sight of the cowboy, tall, silent, straight in the saddle, his gaze flickered. "What do you want here?" He rasped, his tone thick with challenge. Joaquim didn't answer right away. He pulled off his gloves, dismounted slowly. Dust clung to his faded brown coat, and the light revealed deep lines around his sorrow-laden eyes. His hand lingered on the horse's neck, steadying the animal. And perhaps himself. From behind the crooked door, Raquel appeared, her thin shoulders trembling. Her dress was threadbare, her arms clutching a worn cloth tight to her chest, her gaze fixed on the ground. From where he stood, Joaquim saw her fragile figure, just a shadow, yet enough to pierce him. "I came to talk," Joaquim said, his voice low-measured. "Just business, nothing more." The wind swept the yard, twisting the dust into dull red spirals. For a moment, Raquel lifted her eyes toward the stranger. The glance was fleeting, almost afraid of being caught, but deep within, past the fear, a spark of hope glimmered. No one spoke. The horse pawed at the dry earth, the sound echoing like the ticking of a clock counting down to a bargain that would shape a girl's life. The air stretched tight as a drawn bow. Antonio's eyes narrowed, further torn between pride and profit. He rolled the whip in his hand, staking his claim over this patch of red soil. "Business is it?" His smile cracked, showing yellowed teeth. "Men don't ride out here for trade." Joaquim's voice held steady. "I need help at the ranch. I hear your daughter knows her way around a house. I want to hire her." A rough laugh rattled from Antonio's chest, dry and mocking. He shot a glance toward the doorway where Raquel shrank further, her eyes lowered as if she could disappear. Her useless thing. Nothing but a burden. But his eyes glinted like a scavenger catching sight of easy prey. "If you want her, we can talk." Raquel's body stiffened. Her hands crushed the fabric until her knuckles whitened. She didn't understand what was being bargained, only felt her heart pound, each beat about to burst. Joaquim stepped closer, the sunlight striking his weathered face, eyes heavy with sorrow, yet resolute. From his coat, he drew an envelope thick with paper and set it on the shaky table by the porch. The dry thud of it hitting wood carried like a tolling bell. Antonio's eyes sharpened, catching the faint shine of hope or temptation. The stale liquor on his breath mingled with the hot wind. How much his voice came cracked and brittle like parched earth. Time seemed to pause. The horse tossed its head, the dust swirled midair, and Raquel head bowed, yet listening heard the words as though they were judgment upon her very soul. In that dim house, the weak glow of the oil lamp touched the envelope's edge. For Joaquim, it was not just money, but a chance. For Antonio, a debt relieved. And for Raquel, it marked the thin line between darkness and a fragile light, whose end she could not yet see. Antonio leaned forward, tapping the envelope with coarse fingers, weighing it by touch. A fleeting smile crossed his face before he leaned back. His voice calculated, half now, half later. When 3 months, Joaquim answered simply, "If she stays." The silence lingered. Dust crept in through the door cracks, swirling in the lamplight. Raquel stood pressed against the frame head, low fingers digging into the worn fabric of her dress, her heart drumming wild. Antonio grunted, then nodded. "Fine, take her. The sooner the better." He turned his head sharply. Raquel. She startled, her feet heavy as stone. Step by step she entered the room, her pale face catching the weak yellow light, her eyes rimmed red. No farewell waited for her there, only her mother's cold glance, her brother's spiteful cough, and her father's sneer. "Pack your things. He needs a hand. You leave now." His tone cut like an order for a parcel to be shipped. Raquel bowed her head. Her frail hands gathered a few pitiful belongings, an old handkerchief, a broken comb, a faded ribbon once her grandmother's. That was all her life amounted to. Joaquim watched her small form trembling under the lamplight. Something old and wounded stirred in his chest, though his eyes remained steady. Out in the yard, the horse tossed its head, the reins jingling clear as a bell, reminding all that a life had just turned down a new road. Part 3. The New Room. Evening fell over Fazenda Esperanza. The sinking sun spilled golden honey across the old tiled roof, bathing the ranch in a quiet radiance. Joaquim's bay horse halted at the porch, its breath still steaming white from the long ride sweat soaking the saddle with a raw, earthy scent. Raquel stepped down, clutching her small cloth bag. Her thin legs trembled as they touched unfamiliar ground she could not tell if it was from weariness or fear. Before her stretched a broad yard green with grass, the air sweetened by the faint fragrance of orange blossoms. No red dust, no stench of liquor, only the rich smell of damp earth and the breeze carrying the gentle sweetness of summer. The heavy wooden door swung open. Donna Marlene, the silver-haired housekeeper with her round frame and neat bun, stepped out. She did not question, did not judge. She only gave a soft nod, her smile as warm as morning light, her work-worn hands opening in a gentle gesture, "Come in, child." Raquel lowered her head and crossed the threshold. No one shouted. No boots stomped. The silence itself made her heart race so unfamiliar it frightened her. The long wooden hall stretched ahead. The boards creaked beneath her steps, yet the air smelled of pine and soap. Joaquim walked ahead, slow and steady, glancing back now and then. He said nothing, but his broad shoulders stood like a shield, and Raquel felt a little less alone. At the end of the hall lay her new room. When the door opened, the fading light streamed through the window, spilling gold over a tidy bed dressed in white sheets. On the sill, a jar held wild purple flowers, fragile yet proud. The whole room carried the scent of fresh wash, clean and strangely comforting. Raquel stood stunned. Never had she stepped into such a place. Neat, bright, with no damp stains on the walls. A real bed with sheets, a pillow, a blanket. Things she had only glimpsed through other people's windows were now her own. She sat at the edge of the bed, still gripping her old bag. Inside lay all she owned, patched clothing, a broken comb, a faded ribbon, once her grandmother's. In this clean room they seemed so small, so pitiful, it brought tears to her eyes. Her hand trembled as she touched the sheet. The fabric was cool against her skin, nothing like the ragged mat on a cold floor where rats crept by at night. The softness was so unfamiliar it made her throat tighten. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon. The wind whispered through mango trees, carrying the lowing of cattle, the cluck of hens calling each other home. No shouting, no whip cracks, no scornful laughter. The peace felt like a dream she was afraid to wake from. Tears welled. Raquel lifted her head, drawing a deep breath. For the first time in years of living like a shadow, she felt it clearly this place was safe. Night came swiftly. The dark sky glittered with stars. Cool air from the fields drifted through the cracked window, carrying the scent of grass and damp earth. The little room glowed with the soft flame of an oil lamp, painting the wooden walls in warm, flickering gold. Raquel leaned against the headboard, her old bag clutched to her chest. Her thin fingers sought the faded ribbon from her grandmother, the only keepsake left. Each touch pulled memories, the whip's crack, her father's growl, the reek of liquor, her mother's silence that denied her very being. Her throat ached. She listened. No heavy footsteps, no door crashing open, no whip slashing the floor. Only frogs croaking in the pond, insects singing, leaves rustling like a lullaby. The strange quiet frightened her. What if peace was only a trap, and the nightmare would come back at any moment? She lay down, eyes wide. Moonlight streamed through the bars, tracing a silver streak across the floor. She stretched her hand into it, gazing at her bony fingers. Tonight they did not tremble under a whip. Tonight, for the first time, those hands rested upon clean sheets, not bare earth. Tears fell again, but not the bitter salt of fear. In them mingled something new, fragile, and unnamed hope. In the dark, Raquel whispered so softly, only her pillow could hear, "Maybe. Here I'll learn to live another life." The hallway leading to her room still unnerved her, lined with old, faded pictures of pastures and family portraits. She paused, staring. Family. How long had that word been a luxury beyond her reach? At supper, Dona Marlene set out a simple meal. A pot of greens, slices of stewed meat bread, bowls of steaming rice. The aroma made Raquel's stomach ache with hunger, yet she sat still, waiting for orders, as at home. Joaquim quietly set a piece of meat on her plate, his expression calm, as if it meant nothing. But Raquel's heart quivered. How long had it been since anyone had placed food before her? Later, when she returned, her bed was neatly arranged, the thin blanket smelling faintly of sun, as if it had just been aired at noon. She pressed her face into it, eyes stinging with unexpected warmth. The little jar of flowers by the window trembled in the night breeze, petals bowing as though in greeting. Raquel gazed long at them, seeing her own reflection in the glass, small, fragile, yet perhaps one day capable of blooming. That night she did not sleep right away. She laid her few belongings on the bed, the broken comb, the faded ribbon, the patched clothes. They felt like relics of a forgotten life. Stroking the ribbon, she whispered as though to her grandmother, "Grandmother, maybe here I won't have to be afraid anymore." Outside, the wind moved across the fields, whispering back like an answer. She lay down, fingers tracing the white sheets. Fear still lingered. Would someone burst in, drag her up, force her back to work? Her heart raced, sweat pricked her skin, but nothing happened. Only the frogs, the insects, the horse shifting in its stall. Ordinary sounds, foreign yet soothing. Moonlight poured through the window silver on the floor. Raquel turned, reaching for the beam of light. For the first time, she did not feel like a shadow. Tears soaked her pillow, but they were tears of comfort, like a voice whispering, "You are safe now." Her lips parted in a breathy murmur, "Tomorrow will be different." And on her first night at Fazenda Esperanza, she closed her eyes, carrying in her heart a tiny seed called hope. Part 4. The Meal and the Lesson of Words. Morning light draped itself like a golden cloth across the old brown tiles of Fazenda Esperanza. A rooster's crow echoed from afar, blending with the lowing of cattle in the pens. Dew clung to the orange leaves, dripping into crystal beads along the wooden window frame. In the wide kitchen, the smell of fresh bread filled the air, mingled with the strong aroma of dark coffee and the faint smoke of glowing coals. The long wooden table, its surface polished by years of use, was laid out with food. Raquel had never dared to dream of loaves of golden bread, white cheese bowls of cut fruit, and pats of creamy butter rich with the scent of milk. Raquel stepped in slowly, still clutching her worn cloth as if it were a shield. Her eyes darted around, her heart pounding, expecting a shout to break the quiet. But instead, she saw Dona Marlene, her silver hair pinned neatly, her hands strong, her face lined yet warm, setting down a pitcher of milk. She looked up and smiled. "Sit, child. Everyone has a place here." Raquel hesitated, then slid onto the edge of a chair, careful not to disturb. Her hands trembled in her lap as her eyes lingered on the steaming bread. Joaquim was already at the table. Broad-shouldered, sun-worn, his face carved with weary lines, yet calm. An old newspaper lay open in his hands, his eyes moving slowly over the faded print. From time to time he sipped his coffee, glancing at Raquel, not with suspicion nor pity, but with a steady warmth like the glow of a hearth. She did not dare touch the knife to cut bread. But Dona Marlene slid a plate to her, already prepared with a slice of bread and cheese, her voice gentle. "Eat. You need strength if you're to learn your letters." Raquel hesitated, then took a small bite. The crisp bread, the creamy cheese, the salty butter melted on her tongue, and her eyes stung with tears. How long had it been since she'd tasted such a meal? Her throat ached, but warmth spread down into her chest. No one hurried her. No one fought for scraps. Only the soft clink of dishes, the rustle of newspaper, the whisper of the breeze through the door. Raquel ate slowly, each bite bringing both joy and a shy shame as hot tears gathered. When the meal ended, Dona Marlene cleared the plates, then set down a worn book and a stub of pencil. She pushed them gently toward Raquel. "Now then, let's begin." Raquel froze. Her heart leapt almost painfully. To learn letters. Her father had always said, letters belong to men. Her mother's voice still echoed. "Keep your head down. Don't dream." Her thin fingers trembled around the pencil. Its tip scraped across the yellowed page, leaving crooked marks. She held her breath, waiting for a scold, for a glare. Instead, a firm, warm hand rested on her back, and Dona Marlene's voice was steady. "If it's wrong, write it again. You can do this." Raquel looked up, her eyes brimming. Never had an adult said such words to her. A small patch of warmth pressed against the vast emptiness in her heart. Joaquim folded his paper, watching in silence. His deep eyes, like autumn waters, held a quiet light as he saw the crooked letters take shape. Raquel caught his gaze, then quickly lowered her head, her cheeks burning not from fear but from the strange thrill of being recognized. The morning slipped by. The scratch of pencil mingled with birdsong outside and the rustle of mango leaves in the breeze. Raquel wrote her name for the first time. U-E-L. All the way through. Complete. She stared, hardly believing. The letters, shaky and uneven, stood together like a miracle. Well done. Dona Marlene's smile shone, her eyes bright. Tears fell, blurring the page, but they were not tears of fear. They were tears of happiness. Joachim slid an old leather-bound notebook toward her, his voice rough yet gentle. Each day write a new word. One day you'll be able to write your own story. The words rang in her heart like a distant bell. Her story. Until now, her life had been nothing but shouts, whips, scraps of food. And now someone was saying she could write it anew. Morning light spilled across her face. No longer only a trembling shadow, but a soul beginning to believe she had worth, that she could turn a page. She took the pencil again, her palm damp, the tip unsteady. Donna Marlene drew neat lines on a fresh page, guiding her hand. Write it again. Slowly. Raquel breathed deep. The letter still wavered, but this time she felt no fear. Around her the fire crackled. Sparrows chirped, the world itself seemed to cheer her on. Joachim leaned back, arms crossed, his gaze steady. He showed little outwardly, yet in his dark eyes lay something, undeniable compassion mixed with hope. Raquel felt it, and her cheeks burned hotter. When the pencil finally snapped, the sharp sound startled her. She braced for anger, but Donna Marlene only chuckled softly. Then sharpen it, that's all. Raquel stared wide-eyed. Never before had anyone smiled at her mistakes. Tears welled again, but now with a new truth, mistakes did not mean punishment. By midday, she had written her name 3 times. The letters were crooked, clumsy, but she clutched the paper to her chest like treasure. Her eyes shone as her lips whispered, "This is my name." Joachim gave a small nod, his voice deep and sure. "Yes, and from this day on, you have the right to write your name, to write your life in your own way." The kitchen glowed with golden sunlight. Donna Marlene's soft laugh, Joachim's warm gaze, and Raquel's glistening tears blended together. That morning had given her more than letters. It had given her a simple truth: she deserved to exist, and she deserved to begin again. Part 5. Nightmares and Confession. The night sky was packed with black clouds. Rain fell in steady beats, drumming on the old tile roof of Fazenda Esperanza, while gusts slipped through the doorframe and carried a chill into the small room. The oil lamp on the wooden table flickered its flame, trembling like the fragile heart of someone still not ready to believe she was safe. Raquel lay in bed, eyes half closed, but sleep would not hold. In fitful dreams, the crack of a whip, the barking of orders, and her father's blank, cold stare came back to life. She thrashed, sweat soaking her skin, breath quick and shallow, then jolted upright with a hoarse cry, her voice caught in her throat. "Don't. Please don't." The lamp shivered harder in the draft, lighting her pale face and sweat-damp hair. Her eyes were wide with panic, searching the room like someone lost inside a nightmare. The door opened. Joachim stood there, the shoulders of his coat, dark with rain worry glinting in his deep-set eyes. He didn't cross the threshold at once. He stayed in the warm pool of lamplight, as if afraid his presence might startle her further. Behind him, Donna Marlene hurried in, a dry towel in hand. She sat on the edge of the bed and wrapped Raquel's trembling fingers in hers. Her voice was warm and slow. "Easy now, child. It was only a dream. No one will hurt you here." Raquel looked at her lips quivering, and then the tears came, tight broken sobs like a spring finally breaking loose after years of drought, bursting open into the rain outside. She tried to speak the words, snagging and tearing as they came. They always hit me, for nothing, every day. If I was slow, if I dared to lift my head. Donna Marlene held on her rough hands, gentler than any embrace Raquel had known. Joachim still stood in the doorway, but his eyes shone. He turned his face for a moment, hiding the ache there, then looked back with a steady gaze that said, "Say it all. I'll listen." Raquel went on each word, scraping old wounds raw. "My father called me a burden. My mother turned away like I wasn't there. Geronimo. He took the whip when father didn't. And Tadu. Tadu kept quiet. I lived like a shadow. No one saw me. No one heard me. I thought, maybe I shouldn't exist." Her voice broke. Her small shoulders curled in on themselves. The rain hammered harder, each strike on the window like the beat of a frightened heart. At last, Joachim stepped in. He said nothing at first. He laid his sun-browned hand on her shoulder, heavy but steady, nothing like the hands that had landed on her before. It was a hand that said, "You're not alone. You've borne too much." He said, his voice low and hoarse, rising from deep in his chest. "But from now on, no one will be allowed to do that to you again." Raquel looked up, eyes rimmed red, and met his. It was not the look of a distant benefactor. It was the look of someone who had known loss and recognized it in another. Donna Marlene wiped the tears from Raquel's cheeks, her voice a soft lullaby. "You are not a shadow. You are a person worthy of love and respect." Raquel bowed her face against the woman's shoulder, soaking it with tears. Her heart trembled, but this time not from fear. It was the strange relief of being allowed to tell everything without interruption, without contempt. Joaquim lifted his hand from her shoulder and straightened, but his gaze stayed on her, weighted with empathy. He spoke softly, just enough for them both to hear. "Thank you for trusting us with your words. From now on, that pain won't be yours to carry alone." Thunder rolled in the distance, but in the small room the lamp stopped shaking. The flame steadied, laying warm light across 3 faces. One girl stepping out of darkness, one gentle woman holding her up, and a widowed cowboy scarred by old wounds who had just found a reason to stand firm. In the relentless drumming of rain, Raquel felt her chest grow light for the first time, as if a heavy stone had slipped from her shoulders. And in that trembling relief, a small seed took root. Maybe her life could truly change. Rain kept tapping the tiles overhead, heavy fingers drumming on the vault of Raquel's memory. She sat shaking on the bed, breath hitching, hot tears mixing with cold sweat. The nightmare clung to her. Her father's shape still roared in her mind. The whip still cracked in the corridors of memory. Donna Marlene held her hands tighter, her whisper even and soothing like a lullaby. "You're here now. No one is going to hurt you." Raquel tried to draw a breath, but her throat cinched tight. Words broke apart as they spilled out. "When I was little, I slept on the dirt floor. Rats ran over me. If I forgot to fold a shirt smooth, my father whipped me. If I asked why, he said, 'Remember, you are only a shadow.'" Joaquim's hand curled into a fist, veins rising under his skin. His eyes darkened as old memories stirred. He too had known helplessness the day he buried Anna and the child who never drew a breath. Meaning drained away then, and he thought he would dry up and die with it. Now, hearing Raquel, he understood her pain wasn't the welts on her skin, but the marks left deep in the soul. Raquel spoke again, as if a dam had opened. "I used to think, if I disappeared, maybe they'd feel lighter. I sat by the well behind the house looking at my reflection, and I wondered if I jumped, would anyone come looking?" Donna Marlene began to cry, but she held Raquel's hands more firmly. "Oh, dear child, you are worth so much more than that." Raquel lifted her swollen eyes to Joaquim. The lamplight etched every line in his weathered face, silver threading his hair. His eyes were not cold, not scornful. They were deep and tender like a river at night. He sat on the edge of the bed, keeping a respectful distance. His voice was rough but gentle. "I thought about dying too. The day we buried Anna, and the little one who never breathed. I thought I'd never open my heart again. But I'm still here. I don't know why. Maybe God kept me for something." Raquel listened, her silence attentive and raw. The rain outside seemed to slow, yielding the room to his confession. A small light flickered inside her. He had been left behind too. He had lost too. Pain, it seemed, was a language the lost could speak to one another. "I don't understand," she whispered, choking on the words. "Why are you helping me?" Joaquim met her eyes steady and kind. "Because when I saw you, I saw myself once, someone the darkness was about to swallow. All it takes is one hand to pull you out. I couldn't turn away." Raquel's shoulders shook. The words stung like medicine on a wound, sharp then soothing. She bowed her head and wept again, unable to stop. Donna Marlene drew her close and patted her back. "Let it out, child. Tears aren't weakness. They wash the old wounds clean. In her arms, Raquel sobbed, the small room filling with the sound of the storm and the sound of healing. Joachim sat still, his hand resting on the quilt pane caught in his eyes. He wanted to hold her to protect her, but dared not cross a fragile line. Only one sentence left his mouth low and sure. "You are not alone." Raquel lifted her head, her eyes shining. In that moment she believed him, truly believed. And that delicate trust was like a candle in a storm, enough to warm a cold heart. The wavering lamplight filled the room, but none of the three felt the chill anymore. Outside, thunder rolled away, the rain gentled. Inside, Raquel told her story, and for the first time she was heard without interruption, without disdain. Later, when she drifted to sleep with her tears drying on her cheeks, Joachim stood watch at the window. He looked out at the rain-washed night, and in his heart he swore a quiet oath. Whatever came, he would not let the darkness swallow her again. Part 6. Festival of St. John. Drums and the lilting cry of the sanfona drifted from the square, carrying through the whole village. Tonight, the Veil of the Forgotten wasn't its usual quiet. Self-strings of lanterns hung thick along wooden eaves, and bright paper pennants snapped in the wind. The smells of roasted corn, sweet canjica, and firecrackers tangled in the air, an excitement the villagers waited all year to feel on Saint Joan night. Joachim's old jeep rolled to a stop at the edge of the square. People were already dancing, laughter bouncing off the walls, but as the vehicle eased in, faces began to turn. They recognized the tall owner of Fazenda Esperanza and the young woman beside him. Raquel sat in the passenger seat, hands gripping her skirt, heart thundering. Joachim cut the engine and stepped out. He rounded the hood and opened her door. Lantern light washed over his sun-browned face, his eyes calm but resolute. He held out his hand. "Raquel, come on down." She stared at that hand, hesitating. All around was the whole village, the same people who had whispered, who had mocked, even shunned her. The old fear rose up, swelling as if to drown her. But Joachim's gaze, deep and steady like the post that held a whole roof, made her feel her legs could hold. Raquel laid her small hand in his. He didn't rush, but his grip was sure as he helped her out. The moment her feet touched the stone of the square, the music seemed to fall back. Only her heartbeat pounded in her ears. The crowd paused for a beat or two, curious eyes, doubtful eyes, and yes, a few scornful ones settling on them. Joachim paid it no mind. He gave Raquel's hand a gentle squeeze and led her through the throng as if it were the most natural thing in the world. His back was straight, his steps certain as though speaking for her, "We have nothing to hide." Raquel felt her fingers tremble, but she didn't pull away. Something new moved through her. Not a girl purchased like a thing, but a person walking in the open. Fireworks bloomed without warning, scattering red, gold, and violet across the night. The light caught Raquel's face, setting her eyes shining. The cheers rose, and for a breath, the whispers thinned. In the crowd, Donna Marlene lifted her chin and smiled like a quiet mother watching a child raise her head to the world for the first time. Raquel swallowed her chest, a tangle tight with nerves fluttering with excitement, yet threaded with a strange pride. She was no longer the shadow hiding in that red dirt yard. Here, under bright lanterns and the weight of 100 looks, she walked beside the man who had pulled her from the dark, and she did not bow. A radiant night draped itself over the Veil of the Forgotten. The village square, quiet most of the year, turned into a sea of light and sound. Rows of red, green, and yellow lanterns hung from the eaves. The wind made the paper flags flutter. The sanfona sang, drums beat a bursting rhythm, and little firecrackers popped and crackled as if joy itself were catching flame. Scents drifted along the market stalls, roasted corn, canjica corn liquor, and fried cassava cakes. Children in checkered shirts, cheeks painted pink, dashed through the crowd. Women wore bright embroidered shawls, men straightened crisp shirts, and everyone flowed into the steps of the quadrilha. But in that sea of people, a few eyes kept searching. They searched for a girl once despised by her own home, a girl who had slipped from the village like a shadow. Tonight, they knew she would return. Joachim's old jeep rolled slowly into the square. The engine grumbled, tires crunching the dry ground. The music didn't stop, but many heads lifted. It was as if a hidden thread tugged the crowd's gaze along until the Jeep settled at the edge of the light. Inside, Raquel sat without moving. She clutched the hem of her new red cheetah skirt sewn by Donna Marlene. Her heart hammered each beat, knocking against her ribs. Outside, laughter and music swelled, but inside her chest, the old fear surged. If they stared, if they whispered, if they called her. The door opened. Joaquim stepped down. Lantern light set him apart, tall, strong, his coat dusted from the road, his stride steady as a landmark in wind. He came to the passenger door and stopped. Raquel lifted her eyes, and their gazes met. There was no pressure in his look, only resolve. He reached out his hand. Raquel, come on down. In that instant, all her old memories rushed back, scraps of meals nights on a dirt floor, her father's stinging slap, Geronimo's whip. She had learned to bow her head, learned to disappear, and now, the whole village awaited her, ready to pin her under a dozen lights. She wavered. His hand remained steady, unrushed. A quiet message. I'm here. You're not alone. Raquel drew a deep breath and set her small, shaking hand into his rough palm. His grip was firm, decisive, but not binding. He helped her down. The moment her feet touched ground, the music seemed to cut off in her ears, leaving only the drum of her own pulse. The crowd did not cheer. They paused. Whispers began to ripple Antonio's girl. He brought her with him. Must be. Heat rushed to Raquel's face. That first step felt like coal underfoot. But Joaquim did not slow. He held her hand and walked straight on, unhurried, as if there was nothing in the world to hide. Lantern light threw two shadows across the ground, one tall, one small, joined by clasped hands. Sweat gathered in Raquel's palm, but she didn't pull away. She glanced at Joaquim's calm profile, his eyes fixed forward, ignoring the murmurs. His quiet certainty passed into her like fire, and she drew herself taller. The music swelled. Fireworks leapt skyward again, bursting red, gold, and green. Color washed Raquel's face. Her clear eyes widened. For a moment, the whispers vanished beneath the noise. Donna Marlene, basket of corn cakes in her arms, watched from the crowd, pride bright in her eyes. She had seen Raquel as a trembling shadow. Now the girl stepped through the throng without hiding, without lowering her gaze. A cluster of women whispered behind silk shawls. A few men shook their heads and smirked. But there were other eyes too, the eyes of those who had once heard a girl's crying from a red dirt house, now quiet with a flicker of remorse. Raquel felt it all. She did not cover her ears. She did not run. Joaquim's hand held hers like a lifeline. The nerves still hummed in her chest, but they were braided with something new pride. She was no longer the daughter sold cheap by her father, beaten by a brother. Tonight, under fireworks and colored lights, she was Raquel of Fazenda Esperanza, seen, recognized, her hand held openly. The music rose again, and the quadrilla pulled people back into its spinning steps. A few curious glances clung to her, but the crowd soon folded into the busy dance. Joaquim bent his head and murmured, "Just for her, lift your head, Raquel. This is your night." She trembled and obeyed. She lifted her head. The night sky opened above her hair. Colored lights shimmered in her bright eyes. Faces looked back, some scornful, some surprised, but for the first time she wasn't afraid. Beside her, Joaquim's hand held firm, his shoulders a steady wall. And as they passed, people drew aside without a word, as if acknowledging something they could not yet name. Drums rolled, fireworks bloomed, and Donna Marlene's warm smile flickered through the crowd. All of it etched one truth deep into Raquel's heart: she had stepped out of the dark. That night, in the midst of Festa de San Juan, amid rumors and gazes, Raquel understood her new road had truly begun. Part 7. Rain and the First Kiss. The Festa night ended with one last burst of fireworks blooming across the sky, then fading into a pale trail of smoke. Villagers drifted away. Laughter and footsteps thinned until only lanterns flickered over the square. Joaquim drove the old Jeep back toward Fazenda Esperanza. On the road, the wind carried the scent of moisture. The mountain was sending rain. As the Jeep turned onto the familiar dirt lane, the first drops began tapping on the roof. By the time they reached the gate, the sky let go all at once. A tropical downpour slammed the tiles, flinging white spray from the ground. The yard shone slick, trees writhed in the gusts. Raquel ran for the porch, her cheetah dress peppered with rain. Strands of damp hair clung to her cheek. The oil lamp hanging from the post spilled a soft amber glow that shimmered through the white curtain of water. Joaquim followed. Broad shoulders soaked his coat, heavy with rain, but his eyes bright in the light. They stood side by side, watching the storm fall in front of them. The rain's roar was a curtain closing them off from the world and turning the small porch into a private room meant for two. Raquel clasped her hands to her chest, emotions rising like the flood. She remembered the square, the curious eyes, the whispers, and his hand closing around hers, not letting go. Her heart still beat to that steady rhythm. "Thank you," her voice caught, "for not leaving me alone in front of them." Joaquim turned, gaze deep and quiet. "I didn't do anything special, only what had to be done." Raquel shook her head, tears bright in the lamplight. "No, to me, it was everything. Silence. Only the storm, the wind striking the porch." Joaquim studied the young woman before him, rain-tossed hair, eyes bright as if seeking an anchor. Inside him, something wrestled, a vow never to love again, and a quiet longing to shelter, to step closer. "Raquel," his voice came rough and slow, "I'm much older than you. I carry too many scars, too much dark behind me. I'm afraid that someday you'll see you deserve better." She lifted her face, eyes steadfast under the glow. "I don't need anyone else. I need you." Thunder rolled far off, but the little porch turned still. Their eyes met, one seasoned by years, one newly awakened, both holding the same deep loneliness. Raquel took a small step, skirt brushing the damp boards. She raised her chin, voice trembling yet sure. "I know gratitude, I know respect, but what I feel is more than that." Joaquim fell silent. All the reasons to stop rose up, but the light in her eyes broke through them. He lifted his hand carefully, as if afraid to startle her, and touched the rain-cool curve of her cheek. Raquel did not draw back. She closed her eyes, breath unsteady. And then beneath the hammering rain, under the lamp's warm gold, their mouths found each other. The first kiss, awkward, honest, tender, and deep. Not a blaze, but the steady warmth of coals after a long, cold night. A wordless promise after so much loss they had found a place to belong. When they parted, stars seemed to live in Raquel's eyes. Her lips trembled into a shy smile. Joaquim brushed a damp strand from her face and exhaled like a man setting down a burden carried for years. "Raquel, you make me want to believe I could begin again." She whispered, strong as a vow, "We will begin again, tonight." Outside, the rain kept falling, but on the porch beneath the small golden lamp, two scarred hearts gave each other the rarest gift, hope. After San Juan, Joaquim's jeep left the square behind, lanterns still winking on the eaves, the quadrilla fading like far-off surf. The road home folded into darkness, the beams of the headlights cutting through the mist. The sky shifted. Black clouds gathered over the mountains. Lightning flashed like a warning. The wind brought the wet smell of earth ready for rain. In the passenger seat, Raquel clutched her skirt, her heart still racing with the beat it had learned in the square, his hand taking hers before the entire village. "Are you cold?" Joaquim asked gently, his voice filling the cab, low and husky. "No," she said, but her arm shivered. The storm didn't wait. As they turned onto the ranch road, heavy drops began drumming on the hood, the scent of dust rising. By the time they rolled into the yard, the sky tipped its bucket. They hurried to the porch. Raquel lifted her hem hair wet against her cheek, raindrops sliding along her throat. Joaquim came behind, coat dark with water, broad shoulders, dripping boots, spattering mud. The oil lamp's amber light trembled over the wet boards, painting ripples of gold across the planks. They stood there watching the rain swallow the garden. The deluge drowned every other sound, a great wall keeping the world at bay. Small porch, small lamp, but together they made a warm private room. Raquel folded her arms, pulse still quick. She remembered the looks, the murmurs, the sting of doubt, and above it all, the feel of his hand steady as they wove through colored lights. She could still feel that warmth in the cold rain. "Thank you," she said softly, hesitant, "for being there, for not leaving me alone." Joachim turned eyes deep as a lakeshore at night. "I only did what was right." She shook her head, lamplight gathering in her damp lashes. "No. To me, it was everything." He was quiet. He saw the same Raquel, thin shoulders, rain-tangled hair, but in her eyes he saw something stronger than fear, a small, stubborn flame. He felt a tremor inside, as if that flame had caught where he'd thought all fires had long gone out. He breathed out heavy. "Raquel, I'm much older. I've lost more than I know how to say. There's still darkness in me. I'm afraid that one day you'll decide I'm not worthy." She lifted her face, voice steadier than she expected. "I'm not asking for perfect. I'm asking for you." Thunder rolled. Wind blew rain across the porch. Raquel shivered, but did not step back. Joachim stood close to the lamp, picking out every raindrop in his hair, every line chiseled by loneliness. "I know what gratitude is. I know respect," she said, voice tight but sure. "What I feel is more." The words struck him like a hammer on a long-locked door. He wanted to protest, to rebuild the old wall, but the eyes that had survived stripes and shame met his without flinching, and his reasons fell away. He lifted his hand very slowly, touched the raindrops beating on her cheek. Her skin was cool, but it trembled under his palm. Raquel didn't flinch. She closed her eyes, her breath shortened, her heart flew, and there, in the rain and the lamplight, their lips met. A first kiss, uncertain, shaking, but wholly true. Not a blaze, but a quiet ember warm enough to melt a winter that had lasted years. In that moment, they were not a widower and a girl once sold cheap. They were simply two souls who had finally found each other after being lost a long time. When they parted, Raquel opened her eyes, her gaze bright as the storm outside. Joachim leaned his forehead to hers and breathed like a man freed at last. "Raquel, you make me believe I can begin again." She answered, eyes reflecting rain and light. "We'll begin again. From tonight." The yard roared with rain. On the porch, their breaths merged with its music. The little lamp was enough to show Raquel's trembling smile, and the water shining in Joachim's eyes. That night, Fazenda Esperanza bore witness to a beginning. Neither of them knew what storms or rumors tomorrow would bring. But for now, one truth stood clear. Two scarred hearts had placed in each other's hands the most precious thing, hope. Part 8. When the darkness returned. That night the rain didn't ease, it grew fiercer. Wind howled through the trees and hammered the tiles, making all of Fazenda Esperanza shudder as if bracing its frame against the storm. In the sitting room, the oil lamp threw a wavering gold across the wooden walls, bands of light and shadow reminding them that peace never stands still for long. Raquel sat close to the window, holding the leather notebook Joachim had given her the night before. Her heart still hummed with the afterglow of their first kiss, tender, trembling, full of promise. Outside, thunder broke open the sky. Lightning flashed, and for an instant, her face was lit joy and worry, sharing the same fragile space as if she sensed something was coming. Joachim stood near the hearth, eyes fixed on the thick dark beyond the glass. He said nothing, but his shoulders were tight. His hand closed hard around his wooden pipe. Years alone had taught him the language of weather, the pace of the wind, the scent of a storm, and the strange quiet that falls just before darkness arrives. Donna Marlene set a fresh pot of tea on the table and murmured, "It won't be a calm night, patron." The dogs started howling by afternoon. Joachim nodded, silent. Raquel looked up, a chill slipping through her chest. A blade of lightning split the sky, lighting the yard white, and in that burst Raquel thought she saw a figure at the gate. She shivered and hugged the notebook tight. Wind whistled through the cracks, carrying damp earth and a harsher smell liquor. Then, bam! The front door flew wide and slammed the wall. Rain and wind surged in along with that sharp reek of drink. In the doorway stood Geronimo, hair slicked to his skull shirt, pasted to his skin, eyes bloodshot, breath thick with cachaça. In his hand, an old pistol, its black barrel catching the lamp's thin light. Raquel cried out, her heart clenched. Her body folded into itself on instinct like a sparrow that remembers the snare. Joaquim stepped forward at once, placing himself between them. His voice was low and rough, clipped to a cold edge. "Put the gun down, Geronimo. This isn't the place for your madness." Geronimo's laugh came broken and sour, tangled with the thunder madness. "You're the one who wrecked things. You stole my sister, dragged her from her own blood, turned the village against us like we're animals." He lifted the pistol. His hand shook, but hatred burned in his eyes. The barrel swung toward Raquel, then back to Joaquim, like even he didn't know which way to fire. "She's ours," he roared, voice cracked raw by drink. "You have no right behind Joaquim." Raquel trembled, but this time she didn't bow her head. She clenched her hands and forced out the words, shaky but clear. "I don't belong to you, not anymore." Her voice cut the night like a blade, and Geronimo froze for a heartbeat. He bared his teeth in a crooked smile. "You ungrateful, turning your back on your own blood." Thunder shook the walls. In a blinding flash, the room held three figures still as a photograph: a soaked man with a gun, a widowed rancher standing like a rampart, and a small young woman finding the first true sound of her own voice. For that breath, the whole ranch seemed to hold itself from breathing. Then the rain crashed down again, drawing every nerve tight. In the tight little room, all of them knew the past had found its way back, carrying liquor, a weapon, and a feud, with roots sunk deep. The storm pressed on the yard, turning to a silver river under the sheets of rain. Wind whipped through the orange trees' leaves, spinning like 1,000 tiny arrows. On the roof, water pounded and thunder rolled until the night became a fierce, unruly choir. Inside, the fire snapped low in the hearth, and the lamp painted restless gold on the walls. Joaquim's shadow stood broad at the window, his shoulders as if bearing the whole storm. He was quiet, lips-set eyes on the dark. The years had honed a hunter's hearing. And tonight, inside the roar, he caught another rhythm, a heavy silence, like a creature holding its breath before the leap. Raquel sat at the table, the leather notebook pressed to her chest. The lamp sent her shadow trembling on the wall as if it could lay bare the unease beating in her heart. The sweetness of last night's kiss was still there, along with the hush when Joaquim had said, "We can begin again." But peace had barely kindled before the gale rose up outside and within. A tight foreboding closed her throat. The old darkness hadn't let her go. Dona Marlene moved quietly, setting a pot of herbal tea down. Its soft scent could not drown the damp and the smoke from wet wood. Her voice came low. "It won't be a quiet night, Patron. Dogs at it all afternoon." I heard them. Joaquim gave the slightest nod, eyes outside. His work-rough hands gripped the table's edge until the knuckles paled. Thunder cracked loud and mean. A blade of lightning washed the yard bright, and in that blink Raquel saw a figure standing at the gate. Her heart lurched. She clutched the notebook tighter. "Joaquim," she whispered, voice thin. He turned the dark of his eyes, catching the flash. He'd seen it too. Wind shrieked through the jams, pushing in the smell of mold and something sharper liquor. Then, without warning, bam! The big door blew open and slammed back like a shot. Rain and wind flooded the room, and Geronimo stepped over the threshold. He was soaked shirt clinging to a body trembling with cold and fury. His eyes were wild and red. His breath burned with cachaça. In his fist, the old pistol glinted with flecks of rust under the lamp. The black mouth of the barrel pointed toward the room. A small cry slipped from Raquel as she froze. For a blink, she was back in the red dirt kitchen, the whip's hiss, her father's growl. Instinct told her to fold small, to vanish. But Joaquim was already there, shielding her. "Put the gun down, Geronimo." Joaquim's voice fell heavy and sure like a stone dropped into a well. "This is not the place." Geronimo laughed, jagged and hoarse, riding the roar of rain. "Not the place. You're the one who ruined everything," he shouted, voice breaking. "You stole my sister, dragged her from our house, made the village spit on us. He lurched forward, boots sloshing in the puddle he'd brought in. The gun wavered one moment at Joachim, the next at Raquel. "She belongs to us," he snarled, spittle and liquor bright at the corners of his mouth. "You have no right." Joachim didn't move aside. His shoulders covered Raquel. Blood burned in his veins, but his tone stayed level and cold. "She isn't a thing. She's a person. And from this moment on, you don't lay a hand on her." Behind him, Raquel shook from head to toe. But the fear didn't choke her this time. She drew a breath and spoke, voice unsteady, but clear, each word tearing through the night. "I don't belong to you. Not ever again." Geronimo stalled, eyes blazing as he stared at his sister. Then his mouth twisted into a crooked grin. "You wretch, turning your back on your own blood." Thunder rolled. Lightning flashed, catching a scene strung tight as a wire, a soaked, wild-eyed man with a gun, a widowed farmer standing fast, and a small young woman who for the first time spoke with her own voice. For the span of a heartbeat, the house itself seemed to hold its breath. Even the wind paused at the eaves. Then the storm rushed back in hard and loud. Geronimo squeezed the grip, his red gaze locked on Joachim and Raquel. Darkness, drink, and old grudges had carried him to their door, and each of them knew the next moment might change all three of their lives forever. Part 9. Sacrifice and Protection. The rain lashed the roof like whip's wind, howled through every crack, pouring cold dampness into the room. Geronimo stood in the doorway, drenched, his pistol trembling in his hand. The black barrel wavered first at Joachim, then at Raquel. His eyes were bloodshot, his face twisted with liquor and hate. Raquel's heart pounded wildly. She pressed against the wooden wall, yet this time she didn't want to run. She knew if she stayed silent, if she gave in to fear, Joachim would take the blow. Her fingers clutched the leather notebook to her chest, as if it were a charm of protection. Joachim raised a steady hand, his voice low and taut like a drawn rope. Geronimo put the gun down. "You're still young. Don't let one night's folly ruin your whole life." But Geronimo laughed, a broken laugh tangled with thunder, the sound of a cornered beast. "Ruin my life? My life was ruined long ago, Joachim. This village treats us like dirt. And her." He jerked his head toward Raquel. "She ran away, left us to carry the shame." Raquel shook her head, her voice trembling, yet cutting through the storm. "I didn't run. I escaped the prison you built around me." The words struck him like fire on oil. Geronimo tightened his grip on the trigger. Raquel's blood turned cold. Joachim stepped forward at once, shielding her, his eyes flashing with fierce light. "If you must shoot, then shoot me." Time stretched thin. Rain, wind, and pounding hearts beat in a chaotic rhythm. Then, bang. The gun's roar tore the air, rattling the lamp, the acrid smell of powder mixed with damp storm air. Raquel cried out and lunged. In a heartbeat, she shoved Joachim aside. The bullet struck the wall, splintering wood into flying shards. She fell hard, ears ringing, chest hammering, but alive, and Joachim untouched. He spun to her, horror in his eyes, kneeling down. His voice cracked. "Are you mad? You could have died." Raquel gasped for breath, her eyes blazing with resolve. "If you fell, what would I have left to live for?" Geronimo roared and cocked the gun again. But before he could fire, a sharp crash rang out. From the corner, Donna Marlini, eyes fierce, swung a heavy brass candlestick against his arm. The pistol clattered to the floor. "Enough, you devil!" Her voice blazed. Geronimo staggered, dazed, but still snarling. He lunged toward Raquel, hand reaching for her throat. Joachim surged up, blocking him, the two men grappling fiercely. Chairs toppled. The table cracked, thunder and rain crashing through the fight. At last, they hit the floor. But Joachim's strength, the strength of a life carved in labor, pinned him down. Ranch hands, hearing the gunshot, rushed through the back door and wrestled Geronimo's arms behind him. Raquel knelt, her chest heaving, eyes wide on the sight, her brother face twisted with hate, held fast under the lamp's glow, his red eyes spitting fury. "Let me go. That wretch has disgraced us all," he bellowed, his voice breaking. Joachim rose, chest heaving, his sun-darkened face worn but his eyes burning. He glared at Geronimo, voice raw but firm. "No, Geronimo. Shame didn't come from her. Shame came from you and from your father for turning her into a shadow to bear your anger. The guilt is yours, not hers. The room fell still for a breath broken only by the pounding rain. Raquel stepped forward on shaking legs, yet her gaze steady. She faced her brother not as the frightened girl of before, but as a woman with her voice at last. I'm not afraid of you anymore. I don't belong to your cruelty. From this day on, I will write my own life. Geronimo glared, jaw clenched, then turned his face away, grinding his teeth. The ranch hands held him fast, waiting. Joaquim gave the order, tie him. At dawn, we turn him over to the law. Raquel exhaled, her whole body trembling. Tears came, but not from fear. Tears of release. Joaquim laid a hand on her shoulder, pressing gently. His whisper was hoarse. You saved me. She lifted her face, eyes bright with tears and faith. No, we saved each other. Outside, the storm still raged, but within the wooden house, the oil lamp burned steady. And in that trembling light, one truth stood clear: the past could rage. It could bring guns and shouts, but it no longer bound them. Part 10. A new day at the Fazenda. Dawn rose slowly after the long storm. Rain still jeweled the orange trees, each drop flashing like a small pearl as the first sunlight slipped in. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of washed earth and wet new grass. Fazenda Esperanza felt rinsed and renewed, quiet and at peace. Raquel stepped barefoot into the garden, the hem of her cheetah dress brushing the early dew. She stopped beneath a mango tree and lifted her face to breathe deep. In her chest, the rhythm had gentled. Fear no longer held the reins. For the first time in her life, she felt her breath truly belonged to freedom. Footsteps approached, familiar, steady. Joaquim came across the yard, his tall frame cast in the fresh light. He wore no heavy coat now, just a rough cotton shirt, his sleeves streaked with mud from checking the fences after the storm. To Raquel, he looked as steadfast and calm as an old tree rooted against the wind. He stopped before her and held out something small, a new notebook, plain brown leather, its pages clean and waiting. His eyes softened. His voice was low and warm. This is yours. A book to begin the story of your life, not the story others forced on you, not the village whispers. Yours alone. Raquel took it with trembling hands. The leather felt cool. The paper smelled faintly of wood and morning. She opened to the first page. Golden light spilled across the wide white space, vast and unmarked as a new horizon. Her eyes stung. Tears pressed up, not from sorrow but gratitude. When she looked up, Joaquim was watching her. The long loneliness still lined his face, but in his eyes, a hopeful glimmer shone like sunlight breaking a cloud. Her hand went to her heart. She whispered, "Thank you for believing I deserve to write something new." Joaquim smiled, rare but true. Not just you, us. From now on, we'll write it together. A rooster called in the distance. The warm scent of Dona Marlene's morning fire drifted from the porch. The grove stirred with life, the small leaves, bright with rain, quivered as if waving in the light. Raquel closed the notebook and held it to her chest, as if cradling a promise of rebirth. In that moment, she was no longer the girl sold off in a red dirt house, no longer the shadow kneeling beneath a whip. She was Raquel of Fazenda Esperanza, a woman who knew her worth, her right to dream, to love and to live for herself. Beside her, Joaquim set a steady hand on her shoulder. Warmth moved through her like sheltering eaves against any passing storm. Raquel smiled through her tears as the dawn widened, laying a soft golden cloth over the future. And there, in the garden after rain, they stood side by side, two people once worn by the past, now found by one another, ready to begin again. Their hearts kept the same new time any darkness can lift when love and kindness carry the light. The storm had spent itself like a beast, roared empty. Morning came, gentle, unhurried, spreading a thin gold over the hills. Cool air carried the scent of clean soil and rain-wet leaves. Dew beaded the grass, puddles caught the bright sky like little mirrors. After the blow, Fazenda Esperanza looked like a face rinsed with tears, smudges still there but the eyes clearer, lighter. The orange rose rustled, branches bowed under rain-green fruit shining. Far off, cattle lowed, the rooster called, and the ranch hands were already mending the storm-bent fences. Everything wore the color of continuance after trouble life stitched itself back together. Raquel stepped onto the porch, hair loose and damp, her cheetah skirt grazing the cold dew. She looked at the garden as if for the first time. The crack of last night's gunshot no longer echoed. In its place, a new quiet held no hollow but tender with faith. She walked slowly into the grove. The ground was soft and fragrant beneath her feet. Above, the sun pushed through the mango leaves, laying warm squares of light on her shoulders. Raquel tipped her head back and drew a deep breath. For the first time, she wasn't breathing just to survive. She was breathing as someone who had stepped out of shadow and recognized she was truly alive. Raquel. She opened her eyes. Joaquim was coming toward her, sleeves rolled, hands nicked and calloused. Mud marked his shirt from checking the pens. He looked tired, dark circles from a sleepless night, but he walked strong, sure as a trunk that stands through the gale. In his hand was a small bundle tied with string. He stopped, his eyes warm, his voice rough but kind. "I have something for you." He untied it and offered a brand new leather notebook. Raquel stilled. Fresh paper, bright as morning, no ink to stain it yet. She took it with both hands shaking. For me," she breathed. Joaquim nodded, a rare smile touching his mouth. "A book to write your life. Not what others forced on you. Not what the village says. Yours." Raquel opened it. The first page gleamed in the early sun, wide as a sunrise. Tears rose and blurred the words she hadn't written yet. Joaquim's promise rang in her chest. Write your own story. She thought of all the years she had been kept as a shadow. No choices, no voice. Those memories, welts, shouts, nights on cold ground stood in sharp contrast to this white expanse. Here was space to fill with dreams, with laughter, with love. "Thank you." Her voice thinned but did not break. "For believing I deserved to begin." Joaquim held her gaze. In his sun-browned eyes, something seldom shown, appeared tenderness. He had lived as a shadow too after Anna died. But since bringing Raquel home, the darkness in him had learned the shape of light. "Not just you," he said softly. "Us. From now on, we'll write it together." A small wind moved her skirt. She folded the book shut and held it like a treasure. She felt a new certainty stir. She was no longer the girl sold cheap in a red dirt yard. She was Raquel of Fazenda Esperanza, a woman with the right to dream, to live, and to love. They walked the garden paths after rain. Sparrows burst from wet branches, singing the morning awake. Earth grass and rain-washed fruit braided into air so clean it almost hurt to breathe. Raquel laughed, a shy, sudden brightness that lit her face as if a chain had fallen away. Joaquim felt it seize his heart. He had thought himself closed long ago, but her smile made him believe hope still had a place in older years. He set his hand on her shoulder, warm and firm as a sheltering roof. "Would you like to write something now?" he asked. Raquel opened the notebook again. The pencil trembled over the white space. After a long breath, she wrote the first line, awkward strokes, but strong. "My name is Raquel. I deserve to live to be loved and to write my own story." When she set the pencil down, tears spilled no longer, the salt of grief, but of rebirth. Joaquim read over her shoulder and said nothing, only nodded once. Inside him, a silent sound rang with certainty, a promise to walk forward together. From the porch, Dona Marlene watched with a smile, the corners of her eyes shining. She murmured, "Morning has truly come." And it had. This sunrise did more than clear a stormy night. It thinned the darkness in both their lives. Under the spreading gold, two broken hearts found their shelter in each other. That afternoon, sunlight lay warm over the small garden at Fazenda Esperanza. After simple preparations, everything was ready for a ceremony without splendor or crowds, only sincerity. Among the trees, wildflowers from the hillside stood in clay vases. The scent of wet grass mingled with the light perfume of orange blossoms. On the long wooden table, a plain white cloth, small cakes, red wine, and sheaves of wheat, reminders of honest work and enough to share. Raquel stepped from the porch in a simple white dress stitched by Dona Marlene and the ranch women. Plain cotton, a narrow lace edge, the hem brushing the ground. Her brown hair was tied with a white ribbon. Her eyes shone her face bright as if the evening sun had risen from within. Joachim waited in the grove wearing an old black suit pressed smooth. The weathered lines of his face seemed gentler now. When he saw Raquel, his gaze lifted with the look of a man who has found what he once believed lost for good. The ranch hands gathered in a ring. Children giggled and tossed tiny daisies along the path. Donna Marlene stood with Tadeu, her hand in his, smiling through the shimmer at her lashes, while Tadeu nodded quiet gratitude in his eyes as he watched his sister walk toward joy. When Raquel set her thin fingers into Joachim's scarred, work-strong hand, time held still. No grand vows were needed. Their joined hands were promise enough to walk on in light and in shadow, in calm and in storm. From today we are no longer two who wander. Joachim said, his voice unsteady, but sure. We are a home. Raquel's smile trembled. Tears slipped free, but her gaze did not. And no matter how dark the past, love and kindness can write another future. Applause broke into the leaves. Wildflowers arced through the air. A flock of sparrows crossed the sky wings, flashing in the red gold light. After the vows, they ate together in the garden. Wine-lifted laughter carried on the breeze. Children ran in circles, scooping up stray petals. Tadeu poured Joachim a cup, his voice firm. Take care of her. She's found her true family here. Joachim set a hand on his shoulder, eyes steady. I promise. Raquel sat beside Donna Marlene and squeezed the older woman's strong, worn hand. Without you, I don't think I'd be here. Donna Marlene chuckled low and warm. Child, you stood up on your own. I only held a little lamp. At dusk, when the garden glowed red and deep, Raquel and Joachim walked the dirt path back toward the house. A soft wind carried the far bell of the church, gentle, comforting. In Raquel's hands lay the leather notebook he'd given her. She opened it and wrote beneath the words she'd penned that morning. Today, I am no longer alone. I have a true home. Here, love and kindness have rewritten the story of my life. Joachim read over her shoulder and nodded once with quiet pride. He took her hand, and together they looked toward the horizon, lit like a banked fire, promising a beginning no storm could put out. Because no matter how dark the past, love and kindness can write another future. If this story touched you, tell us the city you're listening from and leave a rating from 0 to 10. And don't forget to subscribe for the next healing love story.